I love him. We're getting married. I do.
When Destiny Clark walked down the aisle at the Whitmore estate, the groom's mother stood up and screamed, "Stop this wedding!" The room gasped. Security moved forward. But what happened next would expose a family's darkest secrets and transform a poor girl from Detroit into someone they'd never forget. Destiny Clark had learned early in life that survival meant sacrifice. She was only 12 years old when the phone call came, the one that told her both her parents had died in a car accident on I-94 during a winter storm. Her mother, Grace, had been a nurse at Detroit General Hospital, her father a mechanic who worked doubles to keep their small family afloat. In one frozen moment, Destiny's childhood ended, and she moved into her grandmother's cramped East Side apartment where the radiator clanked through cold nights and the smell of collard greens always filled the kitchen. Her grandmother, a woman whose hands were weathered from decades of cleaning other people's houses, raised Destiny with an iron will wrapped in unconditional love. She taught her that dignity wasn't about what you owned, but about how you carried yourself. Destiny absorbed every lesson, worked her way through community college while her grandmother's health deteriorated, and by 28 she was juggling 3 jobs. Hospital receptionist by day, online tutor at night, weekend catering gigs whenever she could get them. Every dollar went toward her grandmother's medical bills or into a small savings account labeled Clinic Fund in her phone. She dreamed of opening a free community health clinic in the neighborhood where she grew up, where people like her grandmother wouldn't have to choose between medication and groceries. It was at Detroit Mercy Hospital where she met Preston Whitmore III. He came in after a minor fender bender, nothing serious, but he was clearly frustrated with the wait time and the paperwork. Destiny checked him in with the same warm efficiency she gave everyone, never recognizing the man in the tailored suit and expensive watch as the heir to Whitmore Pharmaceuticals. She made him laugh with a comment about hospital coffee being the real emergency, and when he asked for her number, she politely declined. Men like him, she assumed, were playing games she had no time for. But Preston was persistent. He showed up the next week with coffee for the entire reception desk, asking if she'd give him a chance to prove he was serious. Destiny was skeptical. She'd seen enough of life to know that people from different worlds rarely mixed well, and Preston Whitmore came from a world she couldn't even imagine. His family's pharmaceutical empire was worth billions. His last name was on hospital wings and university buildings. He'd gone to boarding schools in Switzerland and summered in the Hamptons. She'd spent her childhood summers helping her grandmother clean the very houses where people like him lived. Yet there was something genuine in the way Preston volunteered at the community center where she tutored, the way he listened when she talked about healthcare inequality, the way he remembered her grandmother's name and asked about her dialysis appointments. After months of late-night conversations and quiet dates at neighborhood restaurants where nobody recognized him, Destiny let her guard down. Preston wasn't performing charity or slumming it for excitement. He saw her, really saw her, in a way that made her believe maybe love could cross those invisible lines society drew. When Preston proposed a year later with his late grandfather's ring, Destiny said yes despite the knot of fear in her stomach. She knew what was coming. She'd heard the way his mother, Catherine's voice turned to ice over the phone when Preston mentioned her name. She'd noticed how his father, Bradford, always had urgent business calls whenever she was around. She'd felt the weight of his sister Genevieve's judgmental stares at the one family dinner she'd been invited to, where she'd been asked pointed questions about her education, her background, her family, all phrased politely but landing like tiny cuts. The engagement announcement made the society pages, and that's when the real assault began. Catherine Whitmore was a woman who wielded her social position like a weapon, and she had no intention of letting someone like Destiny Clark into her family. At the pre-wedding dinner, Destiny arrived to find her place card had been moved to a small side table near the kitchen, while Preston's ex-girlfriend, a blonde socialite named Tatiana, sat in what should have been Destiny's seat. When Destiny quietly mentioned the mistake, Catherine had smiled coldly and said, "Oh, darling, I thought you'd be more comfortable there. Isn't that closer to where you usually sit?" Genevieve was more modern in her cruelty. posting cryptic Instagram stories about gold diggers and social climbers, tagging luxury brands and hashtagging old money with enough deniability that she could claim innocence if confronted. Anonymous gossip blogs picked up the story, running pieces with headlines like Whitmore airs questionable engagement and from Detroit streets to billionaire sheets. The comment sections filled with speculation about pregnancy traps and calculated seduction. The family's lawyer, Richard Pemberton, a silver-haired man who'd served the Whitmores for 30 years, conducted what he called a routine background check. He presented his findings at a family meeting that Destiny wasn't invited to, laying out her financial history like evidence at a trial. Eviction notices from when her grandmother couldn't work, medical debt that had gone to collections, student loans she was still paying off, the fact that she'd once worked a 3-month temp job at a Whitmore Pharmaceuticals facility 5 years ago, which Catherine seized on as proof that Destiny had been plotting this all along. Bradford Whitmore told his son that if he went through with the wedding, he'd be disowned. Catherine threatened to cut him out of the family trust. Genevieve warned him that he'd be a social pariah, that their entire circle would turn on him. Preston, to his credit, refused to back down, but Destiny could see the toll it was taking. He became quieter, more tense, caught between the woman he loved and the family whose approval he'd spent his entire life trying to earn. The prenuptial agreement Catherine's lawyers drew up was deliberately humiliating. It specified that if the marriage ended for any reason, Destiny would receive nothing, not even gifts given during the marriage. She would have no claim to property, investments, or the Whitmore name. She'd have to sign an NDA preventing her from discussing the family in any public forum. When Destiny read through it, her hands shaking, she felt the sting of every assumption they'd made about her. She signed it without argument, which only seemed to confirm their suspicions. A woman with nothing to hide would fight back, Catherine reasoned. Destiny's compliance must be strategy. The engagement party was worse. Catherine gave a speech that on the surface sounded welcoming, but every sentence contained a barb. She talked about how the Whitmore family had always been open-minded and progressive, how they donated to inner-city schools and urban development programs, how they believed in giving people opportunities regardless of their background. She looked directly at Destiny when she said that sometimes love meant looking past obvious differences in breeding and education. The room full of society elites understood exactly what she meant, and Destiny sat there with a frozen smile, feeling Preston's hand squeeze hers under the table. The wedding dress shopping trip became another humiliation. Catherine's friend owned an exclusive bridal boutique in Birmingham, and when Destiny arrived with her maid of honor Imani, the owner kept bringing out dresses that were clearly wrong, claiming nothing seemed to fit right on Destiny's frame. When Destiny finally found a dress she loved on her own, simple and elegant, the owner pursed her lips and said it wasn't really appropriate for a Whitmore wedding. Catherine suggested something with more coverage, something less attention-seeking, something that wouldn't make people think Destiny was trying too hard. The bridal shower was attended entirely by Catherine's friends, women with multiple last names and inherited jewelry, who asked Destiny questions that sounded innocent but weren't. How had she and Preston really met? Had she known who he was right away? What did her family think about the marriage? Did she plan to continue working after the wedding, or would she be too busy enjoying her new lifestyle? When Destiny mentioned her dream of opening a community health clinic, one woman actually laughed and said how quaint that was, like playing dress-up with other people's money. Then came the magazine article. A local society publication ran a feature called The Whitmore Controversy, Love or Social Climbing. It included side-by-side photos of Destiny at the hospital in her work scrubs and Preston at a charity gala in a tuxedo. It quoted anonymous family friends expressing concern that Preston was being manipulated. It dug into Destiny's past, painting her grandmother's East Side apartment as some kind of tragic backdrop that had obviously motivated Destiny to seek a better life through any means necessary. The breaking point came 2 weeks before the wedding. Destiny overheard Catherine on the phone in Preston's family library, not realizing Destiny had come back inside after forgetting her purse. Catherine's voice was low and conspiratorial as she told whoever was on the other end, We'll let her have her little wedding. The photos will be gorgeous, and Preston will get it out of his system. Then we'll make her life so miserable she'll leave with a settlement within a year. It's cleaner that way. Destiny stood frozen in the hallway, her heart hammering. She'd known they disliked her, but this was different. This was a long-term plan to destroy her. She called Imani that night, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe, saying she couldn't do it. She couldn't marry into a family that hated her this much. Imani, who'd been her best friend since elementary school, let her cry it out before saying quietly, "Destiny, you've survived everything life threw at you. You really gonna let these people make you give up the man you love? You really gonna prove them right by running?" So Destiny decided to go through with it, telling herself that once she and Preston were married, once they could build their own life separate from his family, it would get better. Love would be enough. It had to be enough. The wedding day arrived with perfect October weather, golden light filtering through the stained glass windows of St. Augustine Cathedral. 300 guests filled the pews, most of them people Destiny had never met, friends and business associates of the Whitmore family. Destiny's side was sparse. Her grandmother had passed away 6 months earlier, and without parents or siblings, she had Imani, a few cousins, and some friends from work. The imbalance was stark. When the music began and Destiny started down the aisle alone, she felt every eye on her. Her dress was beautiful, the flowers were perfect, and Preston stood at the altar looking at her like she was the only person in the world. But she could also feel Catherine's cold stare, see Genevieve's smirk, sense the whispers rippling through the pews. She held her head high the way her grandmother taught her, remembering that dignity came from within. The ceremony proceeded smoothly. The priest spoke about love and commitment. Preston's hands were warm when he took hers. They were halfway through their vows when Catherine Whitmore suddenly stood up, her movement so abrupt that her chair scraped loudly against the marble floor. "Stop this wedding," she announced, her voice ringing through the cathedral. "I have something everyone needs to hear." The gasps were immediate. Phones came out. Preston turned to his mother in disbelief. "Mother, what are you doing?" Catherine held up a manila folder, her expression triumphant. "This woman has been lying to all of us. I hired investigators, real ones, not the softball inquiry Richard conducted. Destiny Clark has a criminal record she never disclosed. She forged documents to gain employment. She's a con artist, and I have proof." Destiny felt the floor tilt beneath her. She'd never had so much as a parking ticket. This was a lie, but how could she prove that standing in front of 300 people? Preston moved toward his mother, his face flushed with anger. "This is insane. You need to sit down right now." "Show them who you really are," Catherine demanded, looking at Destiny with pure venom. "Tell them why you really targeted my son." The cathedral doors opened with a heavy creak, and every head turned. An elderly black man in an impeccably tailored suit walked slowly down the aisle, leaning on a cane. He had the bearing of someone used to being listened to, and the room fell silent. "Catherine Whitmore," he said, his voice carrying despite his age. "You're absolutely right. But not in the way you think." Preston looked between the stranger and Destiny, confused. Destiny stared at the man, not recognizing him at all. The man stopped beside Destiny and looked at her with tears in his eyes. "My name is Dr. Eugene Blackwell. I've been searching for you for 3 years." Destiny shook her head, bewildered. "I don't understand. I don't know you." "No," Dr. Blackwell said gently, "but I knew your mother. Grace Clark saved my daughter's life 15 years ago." The cathedral was so quiet you could hear the traffic outside. Dr. Blackwell turned to address the crowd, his voice growing stronger. "Grace Clark was a nurse at Detroit General Hospital. My daughter had been misdiagnosed with a common infection. Grace reviewed her charts on a hunch during a double shift and realized it was actually a rare blood disorder. She went against hospital administration, risked her job, and demanded additional testing. She was right. Without her intervention, my daughter would have died within a week." Destiny's eyes filled with tears. She'd known her mother was a good nurse, but she'd never heard this story. Grace died before I could properly thank her, Dr. Blackwell continued, but I've spent years trying to find her family, to tell them what she meant to us. And in my research, I discovered something else. He pulled papers from his jacket. Grace Clark was more than a dedicated nurse. She was a researcher. She co-authored multiple papers on rare blood disorders. Her work on treatment protocols revolutionized how we approach certain conditions. Hospitals worldwide use methods she developed. Bradford Whitmore stood up, his face pale. This has nothing to do with this wedding. Oh, but it does, Dr. Blackwell said sharply. Because Whitmore Pharmaceuticals built your top-selling drug, Hemaxil, using research protocols inspired directly by Grace Clark's work. You've made over $2 billion from that drug, and Grace Clark's name appears nowhere in your patents or your company history. The murmuring began, waves of shock rippling through the guests. Catherine looked like she'd been slapped. Preston turned to his father with horror dawning on his face, but Dr. Blackwell wasn't finished. He looked toward the pews, and Richard Pemberton, the family lawyer, stood up slowly. His face was drawn with guilt. I need to make a confession, Richard said, his voice shaking. Catherine and Bradford hired me to investigate Destiny, to find anything that could stop this wedding. But what I found was very different than what they wanted. He pulled out his own folder. Grace Clark's research partner was a man named Dr. Harold Bennett. Before Grace died, they filed joint patents on several medical protocols. Dr. Bennett died childless last year, and his will left everything to the descendants of Grace Clark. The letters went to an old address. Destiny, you're the legal heir to medical patents that generate millions in annual royalties. The cathedral erupted. Destiny couldn't breathe. Preston grabbed her hand. Catherine's face went from pale to crimson. Richard's voice rose above the chaos. There's more. I investigated the Hemaxil patent filing. Bradford Whitmore personally oversaw it. He knew about Grace Clark's work. He deliberately suppressed her name from the attributions to avoid paying royalties. Whitmore Pharmaceuticals built its fortune partially on stolen intellectual property. Catherine tried to speak, but no words came. She swayed, and for a moment Destiny thought she might actually faint. Genevieve was already trying to slip toward the exit, but Imani, loyal to the end, had positioned herself by the door with her arms crossed. Preston looked at Destiny, his eyes full of tears and something that might have been shame. I didn't know. I swear to you I had no idea about any of this. Destiny believed him. She could see the devastation in his face, the realization that his family's wealth was built on the erasure of her mother's legacy. The room waited, 300 people holding their breath, phones recording, this scandal already spreading across social media. Destiny looked at Catherine, who'd tried so hard to destroy her. She looked at Bradford, who'd stolen from her mother. She looked at the lawyers and the society friends and all the people who'd assumed she was worthless. She had the power now to destroy all of them. The patents, the theft, the lawsuits that could follow. She could take everything the Whitmore family had built. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind. Hate destroys the hater, not the hated. Destiny took a deep breath and spoke clearly. My mother saved lives because that's who she was. She didn't do it for recognition or money. She did it because it was right. She looked at Catherine. My grandmother taught me that carrying hate in your heart only poisons yourself, so I'm going to make you an offer. The cathedral leaned forward collectively. I will drop any legal action regarding the patents and the theft of my mother's work on one condition. Whitmore Pharmaceuticals will establish the Grace Clark Memorial Foundation. It will provide free medication to underserved communities and fund community health clinics. My mother's name will be properly credited for her contributions to medical research, and the foundation will operate independently from family control. She turned to Preston, her voice softer. And I need to know if you still want to marry me. Not the poor girl you thought you were saving, not the heiress I didn't know I was. Just me. Preston's answer was to kiss her, right there in front of everyone, his tears mixing with hers. The priest, who'd been standing frozen in shock, cleared his throat and asked if they'd like to continue the ceremony. They married in that cathedral with the society crowd watching in stunned silence. Catherine and Bradford sat like statues, their social armor cracked beyond repair. Richard Pemberton approached Destiny after the ceremony and quietly asked if he could resign from the Whitmore family's service and work for her foundation instead. She said yes. 6 months later, the Grace Clark Memorial Foundation opened its first community health clinic in Detroit's East Side, 3 blocks from where Destiny grew up. She'd used her inheritance not for mansions or luxury, but to build what she'd always dreamed of. Preston left Whitmore Pharmaceuticals, unable to continue working for a company built on his parents' lies. He joined the foundation, using his business expertise to expand their reach. 5,555,555,555,555. Catherine and Bradford lost more than money. They lost their standing. The story of how they'd tried to humiliate Destiny at her own wedding while their family fortune rested on her mother's stolen work spread like wildfire. Invitations dried up. Business partners distanced themselves. Their name, once golden, became tarnished. Destiny's wedding photo went viral, but not for the reasons Catherine had feared. It became a symbol of grace under pressure, of choosing mercy over revenge. People shared it with captions about hidden legacies and the power of forgiveness. Destiny never sought the attention, but she used the platform to talk about healthcare inequality and the importance of crediting contributions from people society overlooked. Sometimes the people who look down on you are standing on ground you built. Sometimes the greatest revenge is proving you were never there for what they thought you were. Destiny. Clark didn't need the Whitmore name to be somebody. She needed the Whitmore family to learn that respect isn't about money or bloodlines or social position. It's about character. And on that October day in St. Augustine Cathedral, only one person had it.